I funded her crisis hotline to heal her, not knowing it was the secret line she used to end us, a truth that coiled in the wires and servers of the very sanctuary I had built from grief and love. The loss of Anna's brother, Michael, was a grenade tossed into the center of our marriage, shattering not just her, but the very foundation upon which we stood. The vibrant, witty woman I married, the one who could debate politics with a fierce glint in her eye, and then dissolve into helpless laughter at a bad pun, folded in on herself. She became a silent, brittle ghost haunting the corridors of our home, her presence a palpable absence. Her grief was a language I couldn't speak, a country with sealed borders. I fumbled with the clumsy tools of comfort hugs that felt like restraining orders, quiet dinners that echoed with everything unsaid, suggestions of therapy that she rejected as a betrayal of Michael's raw, unmedicalized pain. I felt helpless, a strong swimmer watching his partner drown in a riptide, knowing that to grab her might kill us both. The chasm between us widened daily, filled with the cold, dark water of shared sorrow that somehow isolated rather than united. My solution, born of love and a desperate, engineering-minded desire to fix the unfixable, was to build a bridge, to give her a purpose that would moor her back to the world and to me. "What if," I said one night, holding her rigid form as she stared blankly at the wall where a photo of Michael used to hang, "we create something for him, not a monument, but a tool, something that helps people who feel the way he did in those final, silent hours." That's how the Michael line was born. The name was her idea, spoken in the first full sentence she'd uttered in weeks. A 24/7 local mental health crisis hotline. I used my savings, a small inheritance from my own grandfather, and leveraged every connection I had as a diligent, if unremarkable, mid-level tech manager to get it off the ground. I became a man possessed. I handled the infrastructure, the VoIP phone system with its fail-safes, the secure, encrypted server hosted offshore for donor privacy, the labyrinthine funding logistics and nonprofit registration. Anna would run it. She would be the director, the compassionate heart, the voice of the mission. It was my grand gesture, my lighthouse constructed beam by beam in the storm of her despair. I pictured us, older, looking back at this as the crucible that forged us stronger. For a while it worked miracles. A flicker of the old Anna returned, not the carefree one, but a sharper, more focused version, fueled by a fierce, almost vengeful dedication. She recruited volunteers with the intensity of a general assembling an army, trained them with a mix of clinical protocols and raw, personal testimony that left them in tears. Our spare bedroom, once a neutral space for guests, was transformed into the nerve center. Soundproof panels, the soft, perpetual glow of status monitors, the solemn, blinking lights of the dedicated phone lines, it became a chapel of urgent hope. I'd stand in the doorway, watching her profile illuminated by the screen, and feel a surge of pride so profound it bordered on pain. I'd done it. I'd given her a raft built from the wreckage of Michael's memory, and she was not just using it to sail back to me. She was pulling others aboard. We were a team again, partners in salvation. Then she hired Mark. Mark's application appeared in the third round of recruitment. Anna spoke of him for days before I even saw his resume. "This one," she said, her voice vibrating with an unusual energy. "His answers, they're not textbook. He talks about the silence before the call, the weight of the breath held on the other end. He feels it." Mark was a former psychology student who'd left his program just shy of his degree. In his interview, he cited a need for more human, immediate connection than academia allowed. Anna saw profound integrity. I saw a red flag, but one I painted over with the brush of my own gratitude. He was hired. He became her star volunteer, the reliable anchor for the lonely, desperate night shift, allowing Anna to finally sleep through the night. He evolved swiftly from volunteer to right hand to confidant. I'd often come home from my own soul-crushing corporate tech job to find them in the office, heads bent so close their hair nearly touched, speaking in hushed, serious tones over call logs, their language a tapestry of clinical terms and intuitive leaps I couldn't follow. I'd bring in mugs of coffee, an interloper in the sacred space I had built, a caterer to their holy communion. The faint, sour knot of unease in my gut was dutifully buried under the heavy, suffocating blanket of pride. My wife was healing. That was the only metric that mattered. The ends justified any creeping unease about the means. The first undeniable anomaly was a server alert, a dry, technical whisper of betrayal. As the system architect and admin, I received automated notifications about performance, security, and access patterns. One Thursday, a flag was raised for unusual access pattern, secure channel delta. Channel delta was the encrypted backchannel, a digital panic room we'd coded for volunteers to consult in real time on active, high-risk calls where a life hung in the balance. It required dual authentication, a password, and a physical token. The logs showed it wasn't being accessed during crisis peaks, but in the silent, dead hours between 2:07 and 4:13 a.m., for sessions lasting 60 to 90 minutes. The primary access ID was Adirector Anna. The secondary token pinged to a device registered to Volunteer One Mark. My stomach executed a slow, cold roll. A logical explanation presented itself. They were dedicated, debriefing after particularly traumatic calls, using the most secure line for privacy. But the protocol was to file a structured debrief in the system, not to hole up in channel delta. Why choose the tool designed for imminent, screaming danger for quiet conversation? Why these hidden, intimate, witching hour vigils? I manually overrode the alert, labeling it false positive, admin oversight. I was administering my own denial. But trust, like a server, can be hacked. The next clue was financial, a language of numbers that couldn't lie. The Michael line operated on a tight, transparent budget, scrutinized by a small board of which I was the silent, back-end member. Reviewing the quarterly expenses, a new line item appeared. Secure Comm Suite, Premium Tier, a hefty monthly charge from a renowned encrypted messaging app service designed for corporate boards and intelligence agencies. We didn't need it. We had our own internal secure chat system I'd built myself. I asked Anna about it over dinner, trying to keep my tone light, curious. She blinked, a fraction too slowly, her fork pausing midair. Oh, it's for volunteer coordination. The old system was clunky for quick, urgent updates. Mark did a comparative analysis. This is more efficient, has better mobile integration for volunteers on the go. Her answer was smooth, rehearsed, and logically sound, but the Mark did a comparative analysis bit landed like a pebble in my shoe. Since when did volunteers do cost-benefit analyses on core infrastructure? The seed of doubt, now germinating, sent up a cold, sharp shoot. I decided to audit the system not as a hurt husband, but as the chief technology officer, the guardian of donor data and operational integrity. It was my right, my fiduciary duty, I told the silent, accusing face in the bathroom mirror. I dove deep into the full metadata logs, a river of timestamps, IP addresses, and data packets I hadn't truly examined in months, content in my trust of Anna's management. The patterns that emerged were a silent, digital scream. Channel Delta wasn't a triage room, it was a private, encrypted lounge. The logs showed massive data packets, too large for text, hinting at image or file sharing, exchanged for hours. Their timing a perfect, damning overlap with the evenings Anna told me she was catching up on sensitive paperwork or needed deep, uninterrupted meditation. The privacy she claimed was for the callers was a veil for them. Then using a data recovery tool, suite I kept for forensic work, I went digging in the digital graveyard, the unallocated space on the server where deleted files go to die before being overwritten. I found ghosts. Deleted call recordings from the main hotline number. They were not the ragged breaths of strangers in the dark. They were the calm, intimate conversations of two voices I knew better than my own. Anna's and Mark's. They had weaponized the hotline's public number, the one printed on posters in hospital waiting rooms and school counseling offices, as their private, untraceable telephone. One recording, salvaged from a fragmented cluster, was the cryptographic key that decrypted my entire reality. Anna's voice, soft, focused, devoid of the weary grief I knew. The main trust fund he set up as the seed capital. It's the largest pool of liquid, unrestricted assets. The lawyer we consulted says if we can demonstrate a strategic shift in the line's operational purpose under my directorship, coupled with your supporting psychological case studies on donor intent and environmental harm, we can petition the board for a reallocation for a new critical evidence-based outreach initiative. Mark's voice calm, methodical, a therapist conducting a session. The initiative being our relocation and fresh start. The case studies will meticulously document the unstable, coercive environment here, the subtle signs of financial control, the emotional neglect post-bereavement, the isolation tactics. We'll build the narrative session by session. Remember, every log call you handle about partner-induced anxiety or financial abuse adds another data point to the portfolio. We're not creating evidence, we're curating it. A long pause, the rustle of clothing or paper. Anna, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more piercing. Sometimes I look at him sleeping, and I just feel nothing. A hollow space. It's like Michael's death didn't just take him. It severed the thread to Leo, too. You're the only real, solid thing left in the rubble. Mark, his tone shifting to an intimate warmth that made my skin crawl. I know, Anna. I'm here. We're almost at the consolidation phase. Just keep channeling that grief, that anger into the plan. It's not just fuel, it's our righteousness. I sat in the dark office, the constant low hum of the servers transforming from a sound of purpose to a menacing, mechanical drone. This wasn't a salacious affair. This was a cold, joint operational takeover. My wife and her empathetic volunteer were using the language of crisis support, the very lexicon of vulnerability, trust, and healing I'd financed to strategize my financial and emotional dismantling. I was not her husband. I was a case study, a coercive environment. My love and support were financial control and emotional neglect. The sanctuary I built from my own inheritance and sweat was their war chest. The Michael line, conceived to honor a lost brother and save strangers, was being meticulously weaponized to destroy a living husband. The betrayal was so complete, so intellectually perverse, it left me breathless. The emotional paralysis that followed was a black hole, swallowing sound, light, and time. It lasted a full 24 hours. Then from that absolute zero, a new state of matter emerged, a cold, crystalline, and precise fury. They had a plan built on psychology, narrative, and deception. My counterplan would be built on technology, data, and the ruthless public exposure of their own corrupted machinery. I would not confront. I would become a ghost in my own machine, a virus in their program. First, I silently isolated their tools. I subtly altered the server code for Channel Delta, introducing a barely perceptible latency bug. Their messages would take seconds longer to send, receive, and decrypt, a tiny, frustrating grain of sand in the smooth gears of their conspiracy, enough to breed paranoia about surveillance. I then created ghost duplicates of the key financial trust documents, saved in the shared drive with altered metadata. They now showed the fund was temporarily locked due to a mandatory third-party benefactor audit, a fiction I propped up with a flawless chain of fake email correspondence from a cloned domain mimicking our law firm. I needed to apply pressure to make their perfect plan feel unstable, to force mistakes. My masterstroke was to become the most compelling caller the Michael line had ever logged. Using a sophisticated voice modulator and a prepaid burner phone, I called during Mark's solo shift. I presented as David, a husband shattered, his voice cracking with authentic-sounding despair. I described a wife who had grown cold, distant, entangled with a friend who was her emotional rock, while I was painted as the oblivious, financially controlling partner. I fed Mark, the aspiring psychologist, the exact narrative he wanted to hear. I watched in real time through a hidden admin portal as he meticulously took notes in the secure case file system, coding my fictitious plight with tags like financial abuse, perpetrator, and emotional coercion, suspected. I called again as David, a week later, my despair deepening. She's talking about taking our savings, about needing a clean break for her mental health. I sobbed digitally. Mark, following his and Anna's script, gently guided me to detail the controlling behaviors, which I dutifully fabricated, each lie a piece of evidence I stored away. I was a double agent, using their own therapeutic framework to feed them the poison data that would later indict them. Each call was recorded on my end. Each clinical note Mark entered became a digital exhibit, proving the hotline's resources were being weaponized to construct a fictitious psychological profile for a real, named individual, me. Concurrently, I turned my forensic gaze on Mark. The saintly former psychology student had a past that wasn't just imperfect, it was a warning label. Deep dives into obscure academic forums and alumni gossip groups revealed he hadn't gracefully left his program. He'd been strongly encouraged to withdraw after a closed-door inquiry into inappropriate and exploitative boundary violations, with a vulnerable peer he was unofficially counseling. No legal record, just a toxic whisper in a small department. I also, through less savory means, confirmed he was drowning in 6 figures of private student loan debt, a fact he'd omitted. His motive crystallized. He wasn't just Anna's soulmate, he was a financial parasite in a therapist's disguise, and the Michael Lyons Trust Fund was his lifeblood. The culmination had to be a public, system-wide failure, a spectacle that would vaporize their conspiracy in the heat of exposure. I organized a donor appreciation and strategic vision night for the Michael Line, a seemingly benign event at a local community hall. Key donors, 2 local health reporters, Anna's parents and sister, our closest friends, the entire ecosystem of our shared life was invited. Anna and Mark were the stars of the evening, poised to present the bold new direction for the hotline. The air in the hall was thick with their suppressed, smug anticipation. They were about to unveil the first phase of their new world, funded by my old one. I played my part to perfection, the proud, slightly technically awkward husband, beaming from the sidelines, shaking donors' hands, effusively thanking everyone for supporting Anna's incredible dream. As Anna took the podium, her smile beatific, her notes trembling slightly with excitement, I triggered the sequence from a custom app on my phone. First, the audio. The hall's speakers, which had been emitting soft, inoffensive piano music, cut out. Then, the clear, clinically perfect audio recording of their Channel Delta conversation filled the room. Anna's voice, discussing the legal reallocation of the trust fund for their fresh start, echoed off the walls. The lawyer says if we can demonstrate a shift in the line's operational purpose, the blood drained from her face so completely she looked like a negative of herself. Mark, standing stage left like a consort, took a physical step back as if struck. The room plunged into a stunned, choking silence, broken only by the damning audio. Then, on the large screen behind Anna, meant to display heartwarming statistics, my data visualization sprung to life. It was a dynamic map. One side showed the illicit access logs for Channel Delta and the main hotline number, pulsating with red lines. The other side displayed the financial transfers to the SecureCom suite, linked by arrows to a simplified balance sheet of Mark's staggering student debt, and next to it, a browser window mock-up showing a luxury villa listing in Costa Rica, dates circled. The visualization was simple, elegant, and told the entire sordid story in a glance. Charity resources being systematically diverted to finance a personal fantasy. Before the uproar could begin, I walked to the podium. I didn't look at Anna. I faced the audience, my face a mask of grim, technical regret, my voice projecting the calm, weary authority of a system administrator announcing a catastrophic breach. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generous support of the Michael Line. What you have just witnessed is preliminary evidence of a severe ethical, operational, and likely criminal breach within the service. The secure systems designed to protect and aid the vulnerable have been systematically co-opted for personal enrichment and long-term conspiracy by its director and a senior volunteer. All call logs and financial records from the last 8 months are now sequestered for a full forensic audit by an independent firm I've engaged. The core trust fund has been frozen by a unanimous emergency order of the board, effective 90 seconds ago. I finally turned to Anna. Her eyes were wide, not just with terror, but with a dawning, horrified comprehension of the depth of my counter-operation, the trap she'd walked into. The Michael line, I announced, my voice final, is suspended indefinitely. This chapter, built in my brother-in-law's memory, is closed. The fallout was instant, thermonuclear. The journalists, instead of writing a feel-good piece, now had a front-page scandal about charity fraud and psychological manipulation. Donors recoiled in betrayed anger. Anna's parents stared at their daughter not with pity, but with a kind of nauseated horror, seeing a stranger who had bartered their dead son's memory for a getaway plan. Mark simply melted away from the side of the stage, his reputation as an empathetic healer obliterated in 5 minutes. He was a ghost before the police could be called. In the ensuing days, the legal reality hardened like fast-setting concrete. Using the recorded calls, the server logs, and the financial trail as evidence, my lawyer filed for divorce on grounds of fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The prenuptial agreement, which she'd once dismissed as my unromantic paranoia, now stood as an unbreachable wall. The court, presented with the cold digital corpse of their plot, viewed Anna not as a grieving victim, but as a calculating predator. She was entitled to nothing from the hotline funds, which were legally dissolved and the remaining capital donated in Michael's name to a large, reputable national suicide prevention network, as per the original trust's dissolution clause. I sold our house. The office, with its silent, accusing servers, was stripped bare. Anna moved to a distant city, a pariah in her own family and the community she'd sought to manipulate. Occasional, third-hand reports filtered back. She was working a clerical job, living alone. Mark, I heard, was driving for a food delivery app, his psychology career a non-starter. The grand, beautiful gesture I'd built to save my wife did not heal her. It merely provided the perfect tools, the ideal cover, and the emotional capital for her to execute a more sophisticated, cold-blooded form of emotional suicide. Now the silence in my new minimalist apartment is just silence. It is not the heavy, grief-laden silence of before. It is the silence of a server farm after a power cut clean, absolute, and finally at peace. I funded a crisis hotline to be her lifeline, a string thrown across the chasm of her sorrow. She used that same string to weave a noose for our marriage and to call in the quiet, meticulous demolition of everything we were. In the end, she taught me the most devastating lesson a man can learn. Sometimes the person you are desperately trying to rescue from the depths is not drowning. They are diving, and the lifeline you throw them is just another anchor to drag you down into the cold, dark water with them.